770 at that time was a very small area. It was the main part where that is the exact 770 of now. But they would have the big Fabrengs, the Yutes Kislev Fabrengs, and I don't know which other ones were, but mainly Yutes Kislev, I think, would be in one of the halls nearby. I remember one on Nostrand Avenue and Eastern Parkway. And they had a little mechitza set up, and we went down and we peeked over the mechitza. And of course, we couldn't understand half the words of what they're, even though I did understand Yiddish, but you know how the Rebbe would speak, half of them with different quotations from Gemara, and of course, that would lose me right away. But it was, the atmosphere was very great. The music was beautiful, the feeling, the singing, the energy that goes on there, and a Fabrenk makes you feel very, very, very wonderful. And of course, being around there, the ladies this was a small community. Remember, at that time, we were starting out. Maybe there were 30 Hasidim at that point of the actual Bachrim. So of course, the Shatchanim right away looked at me. My sisters got married to a Lubavitcher, and here as a prize package, a short girl. And someone who's interested in a boy with a beard, because my brother-in-law did have a beard, so I was probably, and somebody that would be interested in wearing a sheitel. This was a very, very unusual thing at that time. One of the girls in Beis Yaakov got engaged, and they made a shower. She got 50 kerchiefs, not sheitels, but kerchiefs. So a sheitel was a big deal, and a wig was a big deal. So they started trying to get me shotguns off. I had some other not Lubavitchers that were suggested to me, and I went to see each one, but I was a very naive girl at that time. I really couldn't discern too well. But as time went on, I realized that it was the Lubavitcher that I really could not think of anything else. Finally, there was one that was suggested by Mrs. Katz, Rebbetzin Katz, one of the Rosh Yeshiva's wives. And we set up the date, and he came down with his parents into the house and spoke. He spoke Yiddish mostly. I spoke English mostly. I don't know how we got to know each other, but Mr. X was very interested in me. And, of course, the shorty and the blonde and whatever. And we saw once, but I told the shotgun, I don't know exactly. I can't say, he doesn't talk much. He's a yeshiva bacher. You think he hangs out with girls, and she'd give me all kinds of good excuses for him. So we saw each other another time, and she kept pressuring me a third time. Finally, he was getting very serious. At that time, or even nowadays, you see somebody a few times. You see 3 times, 4 times. If you're interested, you go further. But if you're not interested, you don't pull somebody's heartstrings for nothing. So you stop. So here, I was very uncertain. I wasn't too sure. She kept pressuring me. And then she said, "You know what? Ask the Rebbe. We'll set up a yechidus. You can go into the Rebbe and speak to him." So we did that. I don't remember if my parents came along or not. But he said, "Well, what do you think of it?" I said, "Well, he's a chassid, and he's a very nice person." But I couldn't even define what was the problem. So the Rebbe said, "Oh, he's not a ball player." Now, he meant it in a figurative way, and I took it that he thinks that I'm a ball. I'd like to play ball. What's going on? So I just didn't say anything. He says, "Okay, well, you could see him again. The 4th time is not like the 3rd time. The fifth time is not like the 4th time. The 6th time is not like the 5th time. And you'll see." Later on I heard this is such a lashon in Gemara that they say about learning, that the first time you learn something, it's not like the second. As you proceed, it goes further and further, deeper and deeper. So again, the pressure came on, and he said, "Well, let's write to the Rebbe." That was the expression, the proposal. Let's write to the Rebbe. So I said, all right, I suppose, because this was something almost what I would want. He was a very nice person. He was a good-looking man. He was a chassid. So we wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "Now is not the time for engagements." What? So we saw each other again, and then he said, "Well, how about writing again? Maybe now it's a month later." The Rebbe answered, "Now is not the time for weddings." So I got very depressed. What is this? Yes, no. Where am I? Am I supposed to stop? Am I supposed to go further? So he said, so I wrote a long letter to the Rebbe that how I'm depressed, how I can't, I think I failed a few subjects. I was still going to school at night and teaching during the day. So he wrote, I said, should I stop or should I see someone else? So he underlined, see someone else also. Meanwhile, my brother had been sent to Pittsburgh. They had started a high school there for boys, and they needed a few New Yorkers to sort of swell it and make it into a regular class. And some troublemakers or whatever, or people that had a little bit of trouble or had a little bit of learning, needed more attention, were sent there to help swell the class. Among them, my brother. My brother's 6 foot. I'm a little shorty of 5 and something. And at that time, my husband, my future husband, Moshe, was sent there as a substitute because the Rebbe was going to get married. So he was there and he was teaching them, and he was very strong, and he really set them on a very Hasidic way. He would even come up on Shabbos during the day when they're supposed to be just reading something, and he would sit down with Likutei Torah and make it very, very interesting for them, so that some of the very greats of Lubavitch did come out from that. Rabbi Turk, Rabbi Zirkin. At the summertime, he came back home, and he started brainwashing me. This Moshe is a malach from the heaven. He is terrific. He's such a London. He eats whatever you set down in front of him. One of the big lies, of course. He's everything. Well, he brainwashed me so much. Finally, at the end of the summer, he says, "Oh, do you want to see him?" How could he approach this king? So he went to a friend of his, and he asked him to make the formal introduction. And he came up, and he spoke to me. At that time, my mother was not in town. She was up in the mountains with my sister. My mother had this habit of knowing that how I'm such a very naive girl that I can't really discern too much. So she would try to always point out the bad things about a boy that would come to see me. They all came up to the house, we didn't meet somewhere in the corner. We all came up to the house, we talked, we walked around the block, etc. So she was able to point out some bad things that I wouldn't be able to see. Well, she was not around. She was in the mountains. So we saw each other once, twice. And then during the end of the summer, she came back. And that week, of course, whenever somebody would come up, I would make a cake. There was no Shomer Shabbos bakeries there, so we always would bake, besides which my mother was a terrific baker. So I baked some cake and had some fruit, and I put it on the table when he would come up. But I did the American way. You put it down. And the European way was that you offered it. So when my mother came back, I baked a cake I didn't have any other juice to make it with, so I made it with pineapple juice. Pineapple juice is very sweet, very heavy. The cake turned out very sweet, overly sweet, and very heavy. And this time she said, "Eat it, ess a bissel. Bracha hat es gemacht. Eat it, Bracha made it." So he tasted and he said, "Oy vez mir." He didn't say it, of course. But then he went home and he spoke to his sister-in-law, and his sister-in-law said, and he said, "I don't know what kind of a balabusta, what kind of a homemaker she could be if she could make such a horrible cake." So he says, "Don't worry, this is America. The Americans don't make it at all. She's terrific if she even attempts to bake. It's pretty good." So the shidduch went on, and I was sold, of course. I was sold before I saw him. Anyway, so we got engaged and set the date. We wrote to the Rebbe. The Rebbe agreed. We set the date. Suddenly I realized the date would not be good. So I asked I could make it a little bit earlier. And he said, yes, it's possible. So we set the date to drop earlier. And he went off to Pittsburgh, and I was here in New York. And telephone calls were very expensive at that time, long-distance calls, so we wrote. I still have my little package of letters from him. And he was starting to tell me in the writing all about Chassidus, about the Baal Shem Tov, and about how he was Maskala and all this business. He's already starting to teach me what Chassidus is about. And I would write, and each letter was a drop of closer, dear Kala, my dear Kala, etc. But this went on, and we had the chasana, later on, we found out that he had written to the Rebbe, and all along he had written to the Rebbe, giving a whole description of how he was teaching the boys, what he was teaching. The Rebbe would give him ideas, expect that he should make for brains with them. And one time he wrote to the Rebbe about Rebbetzin Posner, who was the Rebbetzin there in Pittsburgh, how she was sick, and asking for a bracha. So at the end of the letter, which was some other things about the yeshiva, the Rebbe wrote in his own handwriting, that the Hashem should send shidduch. He should send him a shidduch nachon begashmis and beruchnis, equal in physically and spiritually. The date on that, later on I found out, was exactly 1 year before. We got married the last day of that year, so that it was really mekuyim, it was fulfilled, this letter, this bracha.